Hello, welcome to Business here on France 24. I'm Matthew Warren. With under 2 weeks to go until the London Olympics, one of the big issues facing the Games is security. Last year, British company G4S won the contract to supply around 10,000 security staff. They announced last week they won't be able to supply the full number. With penalties to pay, the company's shares were down 9% today.
It was meant to be a flagship deal. Instead, it's being called an Olympic debacle. G4S's contract to supply security for the London Games was worth £284 million, but a failure to provide the required 10,500 staff will now incur them losses estimated at up to £50 million.
It's a very complex process to recruit and deliver that many people for quite a short period of time. We interviewed 100,000, we had applications from 100,000 people, we interviewed 50,000. We've got 4,000 people on the ground now, we've got another 6,000 ready to go.
The CEO says his future is now on the line. He's been with the company for 27 years. G4S is facing penalties of £10 to £20 million for failing to meet the contract requirements and more from covering the cost of drafting in 3,500 soldiers to make up the shortfall in staff.
There was always going to be a very significant armed forces component. It will now be a bit larger than we originally envisaged it being.
G4S is the world's third largest private employer and made pre-tax profits of £279 million last year. Investors are watching its next move closely.
The ironic thing is, leading up to what's happened in terms of the Olympic contract, the shares have been very highly rated by the market. But of course, as we've seen over the last couple of days, management have fallen out of favour and the shares have fallen out of bed.
After Monday's battering on the markets, the company's CEO will have to face some tough questions from British MPs at a parliamentary hearing on Tuesday.
Well, markets have been digesting the latest predictions on the world economy from the IMF today. It says the global economic recovery is still at risk and that Eurozone economies are in a precarious situation. The IMF shaved 0.1% from this year's forecast and says growth in 2013 will be 3.9%. Here in the Eurozone, growth is expected to be slightly lower next year than previously forecast. The director of the organisation's Monetary and Capital Markets Department said more efforts are needed to support banks.
Policymakers should do a number of things. Strengthen the balance sheets of viable banks where needed, through recapitalizations and restructurings, and in some cases this may involve direct equity injections from the European Stability Mechanism.
Well, most European markets took the news in their stride. The Spanish IBEX saw the biggest fall today. That was down around 2%. In the US, markets have also been trading down today. Well, they were disappointed by the latest news on retail spending. Figures were down 0.5% in June. That was a bigger fall than the 0.2% drop recorded in May, and it's the third straight months of declines. The IMF also predicted that the recession in Spain will continue into next year. Contraction of 0.6% is now expected in 2013. Well, that news came as thousands of demonstrators continue to protest against austerity measures in Madrid. For them, the cuts have gone far enough.
This isn't a solution to the crisis. This will create more poverty, more unemployment, and more people will suffer in Spain. I think we've had enough.
These measures are effective for the debt problem, but they won't help the economy get back on its feet. All these measures will not save Spain from this crisis.
The IMF also trimmed France's growth forecast. The country is expected to grow 0.3% this year and 0.8% next. Lawmakers were in action today as they voted to start taxing overtime hours again. Removing taxes on overtime was a key policy of the last Sarkozy government. The new government wants employers to take on extra staff rather than pay for overtime. Well, shares in Peugeot Citroën were down a further 7% today as the company prepares to close a major plant in France. The story's a very different one in Brazil. Production's running at full capacity there and a big expansion is planned.
Northwest of Rio de Janeiro lies Porto Real and the factories of PSA Peugeot Citroën. Among its 4,500 employees, there's no sign of a crisis. 6 days a week, production lines here are working at full throttle. a mark of the company's faith in the Brazilian market. In October last year, the French group announced long-term investment worth €940 million. The aim to double production capacity in Brazil by 2015.
At the end of 2011, the production line finished here. Since the expansion, everything you see from here to there is new. All of this was built in order to increase our production capacity.
To set the pace and make this site a touchstone for the company, Peugeot Citroën has appointed a young mechanical engineer as manager. At the relatively tender age of 35, Ana Isabel Fernandez is in charge of the 3,600 workers manning the assembly lines.
At the moment, we have a production capacity of 150,000 vehicles a year. At the end of the year, we expect to be producing 220,000. That means 40 vehicles an hour. And in 2015, we'll be producing close to 300,000 cars. Clearly, Latin America is a market where PSA wants to grow in a robust and sustainable way.
Yet the company's market share in Brazil remains a modest 5.5%. And with the country's economic boom sputtering, it will have to boost its fortunes even further if it's to remain a force in Latin America.
Well, staying with France, and the nuclear giant Areva saw its shares up 7.5% on Monday. Investors welcomed news it was selling its stake in Canadian gold producer La Mancha Resources. That was for €250 million. Shares were up despite news of yet another delay to a nuclear plant it's building in Finland. Well, more than 1 year on from the Fukushima disaster, most of Japan's nuclear capacity is still shut down. On Monday, thousands of people rallied in Tokyo to demand the end of nuclear power in Japan. A third of the country's power had previously been generated by nuclear. Around 75,000 protesters were there. Let's hear from them.
More and more people are gathering to make a point, so I came here to join them, in the hope that the Japanese government will hear our voices.
We already have enough nuclear waste to last for another 100,000 years. We cannot let it grow anymore. I cannot tolerate a government that lets that happen.
Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.